House of the Dragon is like just a couple weeks away, and I can't believe it. As a lot of you on this channel know, I absolutely love Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is my favorite TV show of all time. And yes, I say that even after season 8. I absolutely love that show. The novels are my favorite novels of all time and my favorite story of all time. A Song of Ice and Fire and that whole world that George R.R. Martin created is my favorite fictional thing to exist, and that's saying a lot because trust me, I love a lot of fictional stuff. And I know a lot of you came to this channel through my House of the Dragon trailer reactions and my Jon Snow video and that sort of thing, and I said I was going to do more videos about House of the Dragon leading up to its release, and that's what I'm doing now. This is the first video that I'm going to do discussing it. And I wanted to start off kind of simple. There's a lot of videos I want to make leading up to its release. And then obviously when it does release, I'm going to talk about each episode. I'm going to do discussions. I'm going to do spoiler discussions. I'm going to do theory videos, discussions, comparisons, that sort of thing. So if you love Game of Thrones, if you have a feeling you're going to love House of the Dragon, if you want to be in on the discussion with me, consider subscribing if you aren't already, because trust me, it's going to be a big focus on this channel going forward. But anyway, this video is going to be the 3 things that I want from House of the Dragon, or the 3 things that House of the Dragon needs to do, in my opinion. And these 3 things are kind of broad. They're kind of, blanket things, because I am an easy person to please. Hell, I liked Game of Thrones Season 8. Of course it had its problems. All the people that didn't like Season 8 of Game of Thrones, I'm not saying they're wrong. Of course the show had its problems, especially near the end. But I left the show satisfied. It's still my favorite show of all time. So clearly, I'm not that hard of a person to please. Number 1, the first thing that I want is I want a history lesson of the world of Westeros, of this time period, and of what came before it. One of the most interesting things about Game of Thrones to me is the history, the lore that we know. We practically know more about what came before the events of Game of Thrones than we do about what was happening in the era of the show itself. Like talks of the Long Night, talks of the Dance of Dragons, talks of the fall of Valyria, or the doom of Valyria, Aegon's conquest, all that sort of thing. There's just so much history to be learned. We straight up have the Targaryen history book, Fire and Blood, which, by the way, House of the Dragon is mainly based off of this. This is a history book about the Targaryen dynasty, the Targaryen lineage, and it's just volume 1. Another one's coming out soon. We have The World of Ice and Fire. This is an amazing book, and even in books like, oh my god, it's heavy as fuck, but The Art of Game of Thrones. Yes, it's The Art of Game of Thrones, or The Art of Game of Thrones. But even in that, we just learn so much of the history, and there's just a vast history that we need to know that we still don't know. Things that we've heard of, mysteries that we've discussed briefly, third, fourth-hand sources like Littlefinger, Old Nan, just people who lived and existed and what they've heard from their parents and their grandparents. Like, we don't know what's true. And that's one of my favorite things about Game of Thrones, is we know so much of the history, but so much of the history is still left to interpretation and to translation of those that have heard it from their grandparents and their grandparents, and like history sort of being rewritten by the victors or by those that have lost. We don't know the truth. Even in this book, Fire and Blood, that was written by George R.R. Martin himself, this book it's written by George R.R. Martin, but it's portrayed to us, it's presented to us like it was written by a maester of Westeros, who, by the way, wrote it many, many years after Aegon's conquest. So even his stories aren't necessarily 100% accurate. And I'm not saying that I want a history lesson to be 100% accurate, but I would love to hear about Aegon's conquest and the Long Night from characters who were not in that time period, but closer to that time period than the characters in Game of Thrones were. And I'd love to see how history either is similar to what we learn in Game of Thrones, or how it is different, and how much Game of Thrones got wrong, or maybe how much they got wrong in terms of stuff that was proven right in Game of Thrones. Like, for example, the fact that the White Walkers just even exist in the first place. Sorry for that long-winded rant. I don't know how much of that I'm going to cut out, but number 2, the second thing that I want is consistency with Game of Thrones, the TV show. And I have a feeling a lot of people might disagree with this, and it's something that I don't really think is necessary in a lot of spin-offs and prequels and sister series or sister shows or stuff like that. I don't think it needs to mimic the tone of stuff that necessarily came before it, but when it comes to Game of Thrones, I really do think it's important. I want consistency in tone. The World of Ice and Fire has a very specific tone to it that I absolutely love, that I know so many people love. And not only a consistency in tone and stuff like that, but I want a consistency in set design. Like, I want the Red Keep to look like the Red Keep in Game of Thrones. I want it to look like practically the same exact set. If we see Winterfell, I want it to look exactly like how Winterfell looked in the show. Maybe not exactly, though. Like, there is room to change and to be creative. Of course, I welcome that as long as it makes sense narratively. For example, the Iron Throne looked like this in Game of Thrones, but in House of the Dragon it looks like this, which is more accurate to how it looks in the books. Obviously that's not consistent, but obviously they can have a narrative reason why it looks different. And I'm sure they will have a narrative reason why it looks different. So I just want consistency. I want it to feel like we're in the same exact universe. I don't want it to feel like it's supposed to be the same universe, but it clearly isn't. I want to feel like I'm back home, just put in a time machine and transported 100 years before. Number 3, the most important thing that I really, really want from House of the Dragon is the human element. Of course, there's so much to love about the Game of Thrones TV show. There's the fantasy elements that people love. There's the war elements that people love. And of course, one of the biggest draws to Game of Thrones is the Game of Thrones itself, the political game that all the characters are playing with each other. But the only reason that that felt so good, that felt so interesting, that we were so invested in that, is because of the characters and who they were as humans. Like, Cersei is arguably one of the worst people in the show of Game of Thrones, but we still loved her as a character because we understood her motives. We understood the human element. Jaime Lannister started as one of the worst pieces of shit in the show, and he grew into a fan favorite because of the human element. Like, Jon Snow was a bastard. No one would have cared. No one would have given a shit that he reclaimed Winterfell from Ramsay if it wasn't for the human element, if it wasn't for what we knew, what it meant to him personally, if we didn't follow him through his very human journey. And I just really hope that HBO knows that what we want as viewers isn't only the political aspects, the political drama, and not only the fantasy, but that human element as well, the most important element of any fiction ever. Anyway, that's my quick thoughts. That's the 3 main, very broad things I know, things that I want from House of the Dragon. Expect more House of the Dragon videos very, very soon. And again, consider subscribing. Let me know what you want from the show, because I know people have high expectations. So please, I know if you're watching this, you loved Game of Thrones. So please let me know what you want from it. What's going to make you happy? What's going to make you think that this spinoff is worthy of even existing in the first place? Let me know in the comments. And thank you for watching.